Good morning. This is the Orphan Wells Mitigation Enterprise Board. This is the duly noticed meeting. It is 10:30 on the 21st of October. We will start with a roll call of the board members. Hearings Manager Thomas.
Thank you. Board Member Archuleta,
Present.
Board Member Mendoza Cook,
Here.
Board Member Murphy,
Here.
Board Member Robbins,
Here.
and Board Member Simmons. Mr. Chair, you have all five board members present.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate the time to come together this morning for some work of the enterprise. I think it might be helpful to start, since we don't meet all that often, for each of us to introduce ourselves, what we do and what position that we're filling. My name is Jeff Robbins. I'm the chairman of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And as chair of that commission, I am a member of the Enterprise Board. Director Murphy, pitch it to you.
Thank you, Chair. And much like Chair Robbins, I am the Director of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And as part of fulfilling my duties as Director, I also serve as a member of this board. With that, I would pass it to Board Member Mendoza Cook.
Thank you, Director Murphy. Kim Mendoza Cook. I am the Director of U.S. Onshore Policy and External Affairs for Oxy, and I serve as the industry representative on this board. Sorry, Mr. Simmons.
There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Christopher Simmons. I am Senior Manager for Public Lands Policy with the National Audubon Society, but on this board, I serve as the board member with experience in remediation and reclamation. I will pass it over to Ms. Archuleta.
Thank you. Cassie Archuleta. So I work for the City of Fort Collins. I'm an environmental specialist there, and I work as the local government designee with the ACMC. And for the City of Fort Collins, we work closely with Larimer County also, and we have a smaller field, about 50 orphan wells that we're navigating together in collaboration with ECMC. And I serve as a local government representative on this board.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for the introductions. We've got 30 folks listening in. Hopefully, folks understand now the various respective places in which we serve. Next on the agenda is an introduction from the Energy and Carbon Management Commission staff. Deputy Director for Policy, Lauren Mercer-Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, board members. It's great to see you all. I am just here to kick things off for staff. Hearings Manager Thomas, could you get our slide deck up and sharing, please? Thank you very much. You can go to the next slide, please. So here is an agenda for us this morning. I am here to kick off the staff presentation, and then I'll pretty quickly hand it over to our subject matter experts, Dita Osborne and Dave Andrews, to talk about the marginal well plugging program and then the orphaned well plugging program, or sorry, just the orphaned well program. And then there is time set aside for board discussion regarding the fees. Next slide. So this is to sort of level set mostly for the public. Why are we here? This is our statute that requires at least annually that this board come together to consider whether the amounts of the orphan well and marginal well mitigation fees should be increased or reduced based on current circumstances and reasonably anticipated future expenditures from the fund. So that is the purpose of today's meeting. As you know, we come together here in the fall to talk about whether any changes need to be made to the fees that are paid in April. I am here for the spoiler, which is that we are not, ECMC staff is not recommending a change to the existing fees. I will, as I said, hand it off to Dave and Dita, who will give a lot more information and context for this recommendation, but we just wanted to sort of start with the headline so that that's not a mystery hanging out there and will sort of be the frame for our discussion. So this board, as the board members are well aware, sets fees for two programs. One is the marginal well plugging program that currently has a fee of $115 per well, and the other is the Orphaned Well program, which currently has a fee of either $225 or $125 per well, depending on the production level of the well. So importantly, these programs are entirely funded by the combination of these fees and federal grants. There's no general fund, no taxpayer money that goes to the administration and the plugging of wells under these programs. So as I said, staff currently recommends keeping the fees where they are. At a very high level on the marginal well plugging program. Of course, the board is aware that this past year was our first year of that program. Ms. Osborne will give a presentation about the success of that program in its first year. We had, I believe, over 130 wells plugged. We had our applications opened to operators to apply for this voluntary program that gives them, they're awarded a maximum amount of money that they can spend to plug their wells and then reimbursed once the wells are plugged. We were very happy with the level of interest in the program this year. You know, it's something new like this. It's hard to know whether it will be wildly popular, underutilized, or somewhere in the middle. It was quite popular, and we were able to allocate all of the funds that we had available this year. That said, we don't know what next year is going to look like. Being such a new program, it's hard to say whether, you know, there are a lot of other operators with wells out there who will be eager to get their wells plugged through this program next year, or if, you know, there will be less demand now that we met the initial demand. It's really just too soon to say. So, given that uncertainty, we strongly recommend keeping the fees level, and then we'll be able to reevaluate next year whether a change is appropriate. The Orphaned Well program is, of course, much more established than the Marginal Well program. And for this past year, the program had sufficient revenue from both the current fees and federal grants. So we had enough money to do the great work of the program, and we don't want to recommend any decrease to the fee because of the inherent uncertainty here. If there were to be large bond claims with many new wells entering the program, which is entirely possible, we want to ensure that there is enough money in there to keep our work going at a good clip, getting these wells plugged for the state of Colorado. So, at a very high level, that's the basis for our recommendation that we keep the fees that this board keep the fees the same this year, and monitor fee collection and spending in 2026 to again reevaluate next year as this board will do by statute. I'd ask that we reserve any questions until after Ms. Osborne and Mr. Andrews give their presentations because I suspect they will probably answer many of them. And with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Osborne.
Good
Thank you,
morning,
Mary.
everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to give an exciting update on the Marginal Well Plugging Program. I presented an overview of the program to you back in March, and a lot has happened since then. Next slide, please. So today I will go over the status of the program, including the results of application round 1 and next steps for the program. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the Marginal Well Plugging Program has 2 funding sources, the Federal Methane Emissions Reduction Program, or MERP, and Enterprise Marginal Well Plugging, or MWEP. Through an application process, operators have volunteered marginal wells for reimbursement of plugging and site closure costs through the MERP and MWEP. Next slide, please. This map shows where marginal wells eligible for MERP and MWEP are located in the state. The eligible marginal wells are present in most major oil and gas producing basins, including populated areas along the Front Range, near Florence and Canyon City, south of Durango, and near Rangeley and Craig. Many of the wells are located in disproportionately impacted communities and in rural areas of the state. There are many more wells that classify as marginal. The well numbers displayed are those that meet all eligibility criteria for MERP and MWIP. It is important to note that all MWIP eligible wells were also eligible for MERP. So the blue dots displayed here would also be red for MERP, but we wanted to distinguish the MWIP eligible wells on the map. Next slide, please. So as we were building the program, could you go back one, please? Thank you. As we were building the program, there was a challenge that was evident from day one. We spent countless hours on the structure, the outreach and engagement efforts, a web page, an application, and what it all came down to was that the program hinged on operators volunteering wells into the program. So we published the application. It was open from April 4th to May 20th of this year. It took about 4 days to get our application, then another few days for the second. There was a slow trickle of applications for a couple of weeks, and then the floodgate opened a few days before it closed. Next slide, please. I am thrilled to report that in total, 34 operators submitted applications for a total of 211 locations. This by far exceeded our expectations for round one. Of those 211 locations, 175 were wells and 36 were non-well locations that I'll speak to on the next slide. So out of those 175 wells, 30 were found to be ineligible, leaving 145 wells potentially eligible. Of those, 145 were determined to be eligible for MERP, and 55 of them were also determined to be eligible for MWIP. In our effort to prioritize using federal funding first, 118 wells were awarded MERP support and 27 were awarded MWIP support. A large number of the wells are located in disproportionately impacted communities. Next slide, please. There were 33 non-plugging locations volunteered by one operator. Locations without wells are eligible for reclamation and remediation reimbursement through MWIP. 29 of those will be funded under MWIP. 4 locations were gas facilities that were determined to be under Public Utility Commission authority, so they were not eligible. There were also 3 locations volunteered by 2 operators that were determined to be ineligible because they had already been plugged, which did not meet the MERP requirements, and they did not have option 3 or 4 for financial assurance, which did not meet MWIP requirements. Next slide, please. After we had the applications, we started the well evaluation process, which considers operator and well eligibility, GIS-based factors for proximity to disproportionately impacted communities and high population areas, and other factors related to the protection of public health and environment. Because the primary goal of the MERP is to maximize the amount of methane emissions mitigated, the wells went through a methane emissions assessment that used emissions data from the applications, the ECMC database, CDPHE's Oil and Natural Gas Annual Emissions Inventory Reporting Database, or ONGAIR, and the CSU Marginal Well Study. Next slide, please. As we know, marginal wells can emit disproportionately high methane emissions for their production levels. In May and June of this year, we worked with CSU on a methane measurement campaign to select and survey marginal wells throughout the state in order to understand factors that cause increased methane emissions for our prioritization efforts. The conclusions of the study were that separators without controls were the most common source of emissions. Emissions were found on 10% of controlled tanks and 35% of uncontrolled tanks. There was a moderate correlation for well count and equipment count with methane emissions, and there was a weak correlation between methane emissions and oil or gas production and well age. Next slide, please. This map shows the locations of all of the award offers. We are happy to report that all wells that met eligibility requirements were awarded this application round. You can see that the wells will be plugged in most of the major oil and gas producing basins of the state. Next slide, please. This chart displays our estimated spending for round one. Again, we prioritize using the federal funding first for this round. Next slide, please. We are currently at the end of the well evaluation process. Operators have until October 31st to sign a contract with ECMC to utilize funding. The contract allows for 15 months to complete field operations. Operators will then submit documentation for reimbursement when the field operations conclude. Next slide, please. The wells selected for either of the programs will have pre-plugging methane measurements taken. Plugging and other field operations will take place. Post-plugging methane measurements will be taken, and then operators will submit that documentation for reimbursement. We will have a data dashboard to display progress metrics on the marginal well plugging webpage, and it will be updated on a daily basis. We are starting to prepare for application round 2, which will be in the first quarter of 2026. Next slide, please. This is a mock-up of the Power BI dashboard that was created for the program. It displays data metrics such as methane mitigated, project status, and program spending. It is interactive. You can use the toolbar on the left to look at MERP, MWIP, counties, basins, wells, etc. And you can also use the interactive map to click on and look at specific wells and regions of the state. And we're hoping to get this data dashboard up on the marginal well plugging webpage within the next month. Next slide, please. I feel that it is very important to highlight all of the ECMC programs that have contributed to building this program and making it a huge success. Huge thanks to all the staff that have contributed their time and expertise over the past year and a half. Next slide, please. This is a link to the marginal well plugging webpage and an email address to send any questions about marginal well plugging to. Also, feel free to reach out directly to me with any questions. I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to giving you updates in the future. And with that, I will turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Dita, and welcome back, board members. I'm Dave Andrews, ECMC's Orphaned Well Program Manager. Next slide, please. As a transition, I'd like to describe how marginal wells are different from orphaned wells. Marginal wells have an active operator. Per ECMC's definition, an orphan well means a well for which no owner or operator can be found, or where such owner or operator is unwilling or unable to plug and abandon such well. Orphan wells and orphan sites with oil and gas facilities enter the program through a commission order. Next slide, please. Before we get to the enterprise fund, I will start with a summary of federal grant funding. Beginning with a pre-award period in July 2022, ECMC has received 2 grant awards from the U.S. Department of Interior for a total of $50 million. The grants are authorized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It is intended for orphan sites that do not have federal or tribal surface or minerals. Work on the $25 million initial grant was performed July 2022 through November 2024, and we closed the initial grant in March of 2025. ECMC started work on the $25 million formula grant phase 1 in fall 2024, and we expect to continue work through December 2026. Most of OWP's work in fiscal year 2024 through 25, which I will abbreviate as fiscal year 25, was focused on the initial grant and the state's enterprise funding. Expenditures on the formula grant phase 1 was about $1 million in fiscal year 25. Our spending rate for formula grant phase 1 has increased in fiscal year 26, and we expect to have the grant fully encumbered soon. Next slide, please. ECMC has 3 more IIJA grant applications submitted to DOI that are under review and waiting on award. The $29 million formula grant phase 2 and 2 matching grants for fiscal year 25 and 26, which total about $12 million. Next slide, please. For work on federal orphaned wells, ECMC received a grant award from the Bureau of Land Management in fiscal year 24 and commenced field work in fiscal year 25. The OWP plugged several federal wells in Rangeley Field and decommissioned a federal tank battery and storage yard for about $510,000. Through a second grant application, administration of the BLM grant changed from BLM to DOI with a second award for $656,000 in September of 2025. Next slide. The OWP started our third major hiring effort last fall, and after a brief delay in spring, resumed hiring this summer. As of September, we are fully staffed with 19 full-time technical employees, and not shown here are supporting staff in ECMC's budget and finance unit and DNR staff assigned to work on federal grants. Next slide, please. This chart and table illustrate how funding sources have changed during the modern era of the Orphaned Well program. Through fiscal year 22, funding was derived from operator bonds and a state legislative appropriation labeled 060 APPR. The appropriation overlapped with the Orphan Well Mitigation Enterprise for the first 2 years of its existence in fiscal year 23 and 24. For fiscal year 25, our funding sources included bonds, enterprise funds, and federal grants. Fiscal year 25 was the first year that required state funds for a performance match against federal funds from the matching grants. That was the main reason for the large increase in enterprise spending in fiscal year 25. Next slide, please. This chart illustrates the OWP's distribution of work by work category. Plugging wells is one part of a bigger picture. Work also includes decommissioning production equipment, flow line abandonment, environmental sampling, methane monitoring, remediation, and reclamation before an orphan site is closed. Our capacity to perform the non-plugging components of the work has expanded greatly with federal funding and enterprise funding. Next slide, please. The OWP backlog continues to grow as ECMC claims bonds. For the end of fiscal year 25 on June 30th, the OWP backlog was 1,897 orphan sites with 948 remaining wells to plug on those sites. Next slide, please. Currently, the backlog stands at 1,906 orphan sites with 929 remaining wells to plug on those sites. When federal wells are involved with ECMC bond claims, the OWP tracks those federal wells. BLM has its own process to orphan federal wells that starts after ECMC has declared the wells orphaned under the state rules. The OWP also tracks a handful of tribal wells with split estate that have ECMC jurisdiction for a portion of the work. Next slide, please. For annual mitigation fees collected from operators, total fees have declined during the 3 years that the enterprise has existed. The primary factor contributing to the decline is a drop in the number of active oil and gas wells in the state. The fund balance remained healthy at the end of fiscal year 25 with about 16.5 million remaining. Next slide, please. With declining fee collections, we took a look ahead at potential trends if mitigation fees remain the same. At a spending rate of about 6.5 million per year to satisfy the federal performance match over 5 years, we will likely see a decline in the fund balance. For 2026, staff is recommending that fees remain the same, but we will closely monitor 2026 fee collections to see if we continue to have a declining trend. The fund balance chart shows how balance could decline over time if fees remain the same. I assumed a zero enterprise spending in FY in FY30 to show what an uptick might look like if we focus entirely on federal spending during the last year of the IIJA grants. Next slide, please. For fiscal year 26, and as shown on the previous slides, we started with an enterprise fund balance of approximately 16.5 million. After deducting expenditures, remaining amounts of existing contracts, planned contracts, we expect the fund balance to drop to about 9.5 million before accounting for 2026 fees. From the previous slide, 2026 fees could amount to about $6.4 million, bringing the fund balance back up to about 15.9 million by the end of the fiscal year. Next slide. In 2018, Governor Hickenlooper's Executive Order D 2018-012 required ECMC to issue guidance for operators to be reimbursed for voluntarily performing work on orphaned sites and wells through a mill levy credit. The OWP created the guidance but received little interest from operators until 2023, when Civitas approached the commission to execute an agreement to plug orphaned wells at no cost to the state. Carbon Shield approached the commission to execute a similar agreement shortly thereafter. Currently, the state is negotiating a new agreement with Larimer County for reimbursement to an operator that would be hired by the county. Next slide, please. With more recent interest in operator reimbursement to perform orphan site work, the OWP is planning to join forces with Marginal Wells to issue a joint round of applications next year. We would gain efficiencies by utilizing ECMC's Marginal Well Services contractor to assist with the application process. Next slide, please. The OWP map layer on ECMC's GIS plots orphan sites that have a planned status with no site expenditures, shown as the light blue plus symbols, and in progress status for sites where work has commenced, but the site has not yet passed final reclamation, shown as the red X symbols, and a completed status for sites that are closed, shown as the dark blue square symbols. There is also a federal layer for sites with federal jurisdiction, shown as orange triangles. Next slide, please. For more information, including our fiscal year 25 annual report, check out our OWP website. A link to the website is shown on the slide, or the site may be accessed from ECMC's webpage by clicking the Programs drop-down arrow on the blue bar, then Oil and Gas, and finally Orphan Well Program. After scrolling down, the annual reports are available on the Reports page. With that, I conclude my Orphan Well Program presentation.
All right. If we want to drop the slides, thank you. And I can see everybody. Before turning it to my fellow commissioners, I kind of have one sort of overarching question. It's got a couple of parts. So, Mr. Andrews, you indicated that the backlog or the availability of wells that could be plugged is like 1,000 or maybe something. I forgot the exact number. And then, we all read the paper and we get a sense that the current administration, that the federal government may be less inclined to provide additional money for things such as this. So the question is, if we've got a lot that could be plugged and we face the potential for less federal money, or even without that component, just say we've got a lot that could be plugged and we're generating this certain level of expenditures, what's the rationale for not like upping the fees, generating more money and plugging more in our state each year? And I anticipate it's a capacity question, but I think there's other folks that would be asking a similar question. So would love to get a chance to get some perspective around that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to capacity, as you saw in one of the slides, we recently increased our staff levels, and that's meant to try and get up to a higher level to help address that. The other question that comes into play is, from the board's perspective, what is an appropriate threshold for a fund balance? Um, as far as some things that had been mentioned, there's a potential for a large bond claim. There's some uncertainty right now, again, with federal funding, especially with the government being shut down. However, we are optimistic on that front. Prior to the shutdown, several states were awarded their formula grant phase two and matching grants. So we expect, once the government opens back up, we should see more awards rolling through.
Okay, thank you for that. To my fellow board members, do others have questions of the panel? Commissioner Archuleta, then Commissioner Murphy, or board member
Sure.
Archuleta.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, thank you for that. I have a couple points of appreciation and one question, maybe. I mean, I just want to comment on how exciting, like the amount of partnerships you guys are working on, the number of federal grants going in, and personally the work that you're doing with local governments. Like as Dave Andrews just said, like we're working towards the application process. Excited about the dashboard, didn't know that was coming, and excited about the streamlined application processes. Because I know that there's been a lot of piloting and we've been experiencing like, all right, how do we do this the right way to align with the expertise of ECMC and bring like the local government perspective? And just a note of appreciation for how well that's been navigated. My question was about like, so I know there was that open application for marginal wells, and then there's that like maybe slow ramp up that was described. I'm wondering if there's sort of a wait list, because as I think about the fees and the demand, it sounds like there's enough money to meet the demand, but the demand might be ramping up as the application process streamlines. And it sounds like there was like an influx of a lot more people coming at the end of the application period. So I was wondering, like, do you have people knocking out the door saying, let me know when this next round opens? I'm ready and I'm trying to get as proactive as possible on getting prepared for these next application rounds.
Thanks for that question. Dita, would you like to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. We have gotten a lot of interest since we closed application round one. So we're hoping that that's a good indicator that round two will also be successful. We definitely plan to ramp up our outreach efforts in the next few months when we're approaching application round two. But we don't know for certain if it was, kind of a flash in the pan and that the interest will drop off a little bit. But we're certainly hoping and going to do everything we can to work on outreach to be successful again.
Board Member Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to echo Board Member Archuleta's gratitude to the staff for the presentation. I have a couple questions for Ms. Osborne that I think actually followed very nicely to Ms. Archuleta's questions. And then I have a question for Mr. Andrews. So since Ms. Osborne, you're on the hot seat, I'll probably just stick here. I wanted to confirm my understanding from your presentation that ECMC really won't know the total final costs from round one until probably Q1 of calendar year 2027, right? If I count 15 months for the end of it and a little bit of time to find all the calculations. Is that a fair understanding?
Yeah, I think that's a fair time frame.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then my second question on your presentation is I heard you say that you hope that the dashboard will be live sometime next month. And I think it would be tremendously helpful for me as a board member, and I suspect for my other board members to have you send a notice to us when it's up and live so we can monitor it. And I think we can use that over the next 15 months to really monitor that spending so that as we are digesting what fees look like, we can start kind of preparing in that vein. Is that okay to ask for? Okay.
Absolutely. I will make a note to be sure to send it out.
Great. Thank you so much. And then my last ask, and this is going to kind of parallel what my question for Mr. Andrews next is I think that, you noted that we're going to open up another round of grants in Q1 of calendar year 2026, roughly. And so that process will probably run through. I've understood that it is very dynamic to calculate what the projected spend would be from that ask and that award period. But my recollection is that the agency was able to compile a rough estimate as part of round one. And I think that if we're able to do that again for round two, forwarding that to the board would be helpful. And I think that this is along the lines of Ms. Archuleta's question, as we're thinking forward about the amounts and interest. That's another important data point that we can get in kind of a mid-year cycle without a formal hearing, but will bring us back next year, hopefully in a more informed space. So it'd be great if, as part of round two, there's some sort of kind of updated big picture summary of round two, if that's possible as well.
Yeah, definitely. Dave and I can work together to get that notice out to all of the board members.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then my last question is for Mr. Andrews, and I'm going to start first with a reminder to me. Mr. Andrews, I think we have to do quarterly updates to BLM on our IIJA spending. Is that correct?
Thank you, Board Member Murphy. So we have to prepare quarterly reports for the IIJA grants for DOI, but not for the BLM grant. That is an annual report from what I recall.
Thank you for the clarification. As part of those quarterly updates to DOI, not to BLM, do we estimate spending out of just IIJA or all of the kind of different pots across the orphan well work?
Those are not estimates. It's basically a look at what's been spent. So total invoices.
Perfect. I think, again, as we're trying to monitor spending levels, fee setting, some sort of in progress update to the board might be helpful. I'm not calling for a separate meeting, but kind of monitoring where we are mid-year might be helpful if that's not too much work for you on the state spending and spending out of the federal funds as well. And if that's something you want to take back and think about whether it's feasible or not, I'm very supportive of it. I think it's just we want to be very mindful about how we are managing this fund, and a data point kind of mid-year would be helpful for me at least. And my other board members may vehemently disagree with me and are welcome to. So my ask is, kind of if we can get kind of a data point mid-year.
Yeah, I would suggest at the end of the fiscal year, which is when we'll have knowledge of the collections of the mitigation fees.
That is a great suggestion, Mr. Andrews. And so maybe if we, at the end of the fiscal year, that's roughly, it's not roughly, it's June 30th of 26. If, sometime in the next month or two, as you close things out, an understanding of what came in and what was spent, which is part of the Orphan Well report itself, would help us come into next fall's meeting, with some thoughts as well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, Chair. I'm done, I swear.
No, thank you very much. Others with questions? Commissioners or Board Member Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is for Ms. Osborne. I'm wondering if, I'm looking at the number of participants we have on the Zoom right now and thinking that this may be helpful for folks that are sort of in the audience. But I'm wondering if you could allude a little bit to how you all are going to be increasing some of that outreach, just so that folks that are watching can know what to look for, and also share that within their respective communities.
Thank you for that question, Board Member Simmons. We will be giving updates in our monthly operator meetings, ECMC operator meetings. We also found that doing direct emails to small operators was very effective. So we definitely plan to send out an email blast to all the small operators to inform them that round two is coming. And then we work with a lot of local governments and community groups. And then we have meetings where we present in their regularly scheduled meetings, so that we can do outreach there. And we're always open to invitations and ideas for more places to do the outreach.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Andrews. I think some of this gets back to some of the initial questions that Chair Robbins was asking, but I'm wondering if you could shine a little bit of additional light on some of the phase two grants that had been submitted. I see from the report that there was a phase two grant for about 5.4 million that was submitted September 30th of 2024 and a $29 million phase two grant submitted December 13th, 2024. And it looks like you all recently went through an update and revision of that in July of this calendar year. Do you have any sort of like guidance or insight from DOI on whether or not those are going to continue through the process? I'm just thinking back and just some of the assumptions of what the program looks like in future years and how those grants could potentially impact that.
Thank you, Board Member Simmons. Yes, so the formula grant phase two, as you mentioned, we submitted back in December. The matching grant for fiscal year 25 was also sometime last fall. And then the more recent matching grant for 26, we submitted last month. DOI, while we were waiting on awards, DOI issued new guidance for the grants in July. And that was the reason for one of the, or two of the revisions that I noted on the slides that were submitted to DOI in response to that guidance. They reviewed our revised submittal and had more questions, which we were answering right around the time that the federal government shut down. So I believe two of those revisions were submitted right before the shutdown, and we still owe them one more revision, which will be done probably this week or next. So at the moment, we're just waiting on the government reopening. And as I said, there was a press release that came out of DOI that announced grant awards for several states for their formula grant phase two and also matching grants. So in my view, they're still continuing along the review process. And once the government reopens, hopefully they will resume that review process and continue with awards.
Thank you for that. Um, a question about program staff as well for you, Mr. Andrews. I think you noted in the annual report in the slideshow that there are about 19 full-time technical staff on your team. As we see that number of wells increasing or abandoned wells and locations increasing, do you foresee a need to continue to increase staffing on your team, or do you feel that given the amount of funds that the enterprise currently has, that staffing level will sort of hold consistent?
I'm going to give it until probably spring to summer of next year to see the impact of the new staff. Usually we have a ramp up time of 6 months to a year until they're executing fully as they should be. So by summer of next year, I can see how the trends are going, and if it looks like we need more staff at that point, then I will get in touch with Director Murphy to discuss our needs. And I'm sorry, I missed the second part of that question.
I think that sufficiently answered what I was attempting to get at. Yeah, just wondering whether or not the enterprise funding sort of meets the need of your staff.
It does at the moment, and that's part of the reason why we're recommending no fee increase for this year.
Board Member Mendoza Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Osborne, Mr. Andrews, for the presentation. And I too am really excited about the dashboard. I think people are going to be watching that, Ms. Osborne. So that's exciting to have up and running soon. For Mr. Andrews, I have maybe it's kind of an add-on to what Chair Robbins initially asked, but we're talking about funding and talking about potentially what a potential ramp up might look like, short of receiving the federal funding. Do you all have an idea for, or like through your planning process for planning purposes, sort of funding aside the number of orphan wells and subsequent sites that you can get to in a year?
Thank you, Board Member Mendoza Quick. One of the slides that I had up, which showed the basically everything that the program needs to do. It's not just plugging, but all the other parts that go along with it. I think of it kind of like a slinky, because we get so far out with plugging and then we end up with a larger backlog of the other tasks that need to be done. Sometimes we have to slow down on the plugging a little bit to allocate enough funds for the other work. And that's really, I think, what happened in fiscal year 25. And that's one of the reasons why the number of plugging wells plugged dropped a bit in fiscal year 25 as we had to dedicate more resources towards reclamation in particular. So it's kind of a difficult question to answer, but my expectation with the new increase in staff levels is we should be up around 125 or so wells plugged per year, maybe higher. Part of that also depends on operator participation. So during the last few years, I mentioned the agreements with Civitas and Carbon Shield. That certainly helps us with our plugging numbers, but often with those types of agreements, that's all they're doing is plugging the wells. So the orphan program is left with doing the decommissioning, environmental reclamation, the rest of the work at the sites. So that's another contributing factor to the number of wells going down as we had to dedicate resources towards decommissioning and flow line abandonment. Um, but bottom line is, we have a goal of an average of about $1 million per technical employee for spending. And we have done well as far as exceeding that with our current staff. Again, with the new staff coming on board, we will have a ramp up period. So we'll see what that spending looks like, but that would be my overall prediction. Maybe 125 more or 125 or more wells plugged per year and spending of at least $20 million per year with our current staff level.
Thank you.
Further questions from the board to the panel? All right. Thank you, panel. Wonderful presentations. A lot of really good information was presented. You're doing great work. We applaud it and wish you all the best in continued efforts. With that, the agenda has next board discussion whether to increase, reduce, or maintain current mitigation fees. So that's the deliberative thought process that's before us now. Does anyone desire to deliberate on that issue? Does anyone have any thoughts as to whether the staff recommendation of maintaining current fees makes sense? Commissioner Murphy or Board Member Murphy?
Chair, thank you. I still can't call you chair. You're still chair here, even though I'm a board member, not a commissioner. Thanks for starting off the conversation. And I think that where we are in these collective processes is that we've been, building a program, especially with the orphan well side of the shop over the last couple of years and trying to navigate to kind of homeostasis instead of dynamic. And I think that program in particular is a little bit closer to that point, meaning that next year might be worth a deeper dive by this board into whether to adjust that fee amount and would be informed by, closing out the work this fiscal year, which wraps up in June of 2026 for the orphan well mitigate orphan well work. And so my thoughts are that let's hold it steady state. I would really encourage us as members of this board to take a hard look at numbers as they're continuing to come in, monitor any quarterly reports to DOI. If things come up that shift or adjust the work of the program outside of the norm, I think it's good for us to be aware of those. And we can think about whether we need an out of sequence meeting. But on balance, my recommendation on the orphan well fee would be to hold steady, pay attention, and come together this time next year and look at where we are and start to pay more attention to the trends that Mr. Andrews started to highlight. So that's thing one. My thoughts on thing two, by thing two, I mean the marginal well program. I think that that program is newer and also in more flux. And so I'm hesitant to adjust the funding at this point in time, recognizing that we were able to meet all the needs that came forward that qualified for the program. I think that the information that Ms. Osborne will be providing as a result of round two, again, will be an important piece of information as I'm looking towards the fall of next year about whether we're on the right track or over or under kind of collecting fees for a program depending on demand. So that's a really long-winded saying that my preference would be to hold fees steady at this point in time and maybe do a little earlier spade work on this as a board around whether to change fees next year, depending on what transpires over the next 6 to 10 months in particular. And if you would like a motion, Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Okay, hold that thought for just a second. Other board members with deliberative thoughts on this issue? Board Member Archuleta?
Hi, thanks. I agree with comments of Commissioner Murphy or Board Member Murphy. To our director. God, there's so many titles going around. My apologies. But it seems like, I mean, the big question in my mind is there enough money to meet the demand? I know that it's a massive logistics and prioritization challenge, and it sounds like some of these processes might start increasing demand. We know the wells exist. Like we know there's a record number of orphan wells in the state and a record number being plugged and abandoned through this program, which we're also grateful for. So it seems like right now, budget is meeting the demand, but the demand might ramp up as these application opportunities get more streamlined. So appreciating the efforts to streamline all of that and looking forward to like checking in when we have better anticipation of what demand we're anticipating and how federal funds might be changing. But yeah, from everything I think I've heard from these presentations, it sounds like everything's on track for this moment in time. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Archuleta. Board Member Simmons or Mendoza Cook, thoughts on the issue? All right, Director Murphy. Or, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Chair Robbins. I think the only question that I would have, realizing that I am in agreement with what both Board Member Archuleta and Board Member Murphy had said, I'm wondering, is there a risk at any sort of risk within the enterprise fund if we run the fund down to zero? I mean, is it just that we are unable to plug any of those wells? Or is there anything statutorily that may actually like cause any issues there? And I think the main reason why I have that question is I may not be remembering the numbers exactly correct, but I think Mr. Andrews had presented on the thought of like a potential $20 million spend, but $19 million in the fund as of now. So just thinking that, at least in my mind, currently that's not lining up. And that may be because we're absent the federal funds currently. But just wanted to know about any risk of running to zero.
Mr. Andrews, are you still with us?
Yes, I
Wondering,
am.
putting you on the spot, but could you take that question?
I I would say the risk at the moment is low, just because we have so much federal funding. Even with the three applications that are still in process, we have sufficient funding to run us through the end of next calendar year. So that does make the next board meeting next fall important, as you all have discussed, and really taking a closer look at the numbers and, are they following the trends that I presented today or not?
Any follow-up, Mr. or Board Member Simmons? All right, I couldn't hear you, but I think that was a no. All right, Board Member Murphy, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, and I welcome input from our astute attorney generals because I'm not usually in the position of making motions, but I would move that the board keep the fees at the established rates for the next fee cycle.
AG Davenport, welcome. Did you hear the motion and was it sufficient?
I did hear the motion and it was great.
I second the motion. With a motion and a second, we will now have discussion on the motion, if any, from board members. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Any
Aye.
opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Um, well, it's a short and simple and sweet meeting here. But we don't have anything else to do. We've done everything on our agenda. So with that, we will move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
2 seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
hey.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, folks, we really appreciate your presentation and your being with us today. I think this was very illuminating. This will be posted on our YouTube page for folks that want to go back and see it who may have missed it. And then there's lots of links there for good information, including the dashboard that we all are very favorable for. So with that, thanks, everybody. We will see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.